Welcome to David Behaviour, a horror book review podcast. I'm Beth,
And I'm Marie.
and today's David Behaviour is another lab in which the creation of a perfect life form is attempted. So, this book, first of all, support your local bookstore by purchasing this book from them if you decide to purchase it. You can get a physical copy there, or you can go to libro.fm to pick up an audiobook. It's also available on Libby or at your local library.
And which book is this, Beth?
This book is Eynhallow by Tim McGregor. My tagline for it is it's premium Frankenstein fan fiction. The middle portion of this book, as we'll get into, really gives off AO3 vibes. And to be clear, I'm a big fan fiction girly. I love fan fiction. I do read it in my spare time. So it's not necessarily an insult. It wasn't what I was expecting. We'll put it that way. So the synopsis, without the editorializing, is that Agnes is a mother and a housewife living with her husband and her children and a goat on the island of Eynhallow in 1797. She is an outsider and only has 19 other neighbors. When a mercurial stranger arrives in need of a cook and a housekeeper with his scientific equipment and weird business, her life is changed forever. And I will say for this one, there are trigger warnings for abuse, pregnancy, and child loss. I know that's probably spoilers, but it was kind of jarring for me, at least, when it happened.
You can kind of read the writing on the wall when it is coming up, but it is still quite triggering in its... I wouldn't say that it's anything too graphic in the description, but it was emotionally graphic, if you know what I mean.
That's the kind that affects me most. So
yeah,
that's why I figured I'd give the warning. So, who is this book for?
Oh, I have a hard time with that. Because I feel like it depends on what part of the book you're talking about. If we're talking about the kind of beginning and build up towards the middle, I'd say that it's for fans of Frankenstein who want a little bit more world building in a certain area of the Frankenstein novel. And also towards the end, I'd say that it's that. In the middle, I guess I'd say it's if you're looking for romance as well as monsters, you might be interested.
True. Yeah, absolutely. I would say, yeah, if you liked Frankenstein and you are not offended by variants in canon, you would probably be good with this book and you might enjoy reading it. I did not enjoy the variants in canon personally. I think that we, as a sort of spoiler, we both read Frankenstein right before this one as a refresher. So it was a bit fresh in my mind, some of the aspects of this one where it kind of varied and it bothered me a little bit. And we'll get into that. However, some similar media that might appeal if we don't end up recommending this one, which I don't recommend personally, but ones that I would recommend would be Frankenstein, the book itself. I would recommend that one. It's always a classic, and I think it still holds up. I would also recommend, just as a kind of a swerve in the way that this isn't a recommendation that has anything to do with Frankenstein, but if you did want a book that deals with abuse in a better way, I would recommend The September House. It's a really good book. I really enjoyed it. And I don't want to spoil too much, but I think it's a haunted house book and it deals with abuse in a way that I feel like is more sensitive than this one does. Another Frankenstein adjacent book that I would recommend, I haven't read it yet, but it comes highly recommended. And I've started it and I really enjoy it, is A Botanical Daughter. And yeah, those are the ones that I would recommend.
And as for me, I always go movies, obviously. And like, in my opinion, if you would like to engage with some better Frankenstein fan fiction, or at least more enjoyable, I think, overall, I would highly recommend 1948's Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein, or even that, oh so edgy classic from 2004, Van Helsing, which I will acknowledge. I will acknowledge Van Helsing is not a good movie, but I had fun with it, unlike this book.
Yeah, I haven't watched Van Helsing probably since it came out, and I wouldn't imagine it holds up, but it seems like it would be fun, a fun watch.
Oh, I don't think it could possibly hold up at all. I have not watched Van Helsing since probably like 2010. Like, I think I watched it again after it came out. So if you watch it on my recommendation and you hate it, that's your own fault for listening to some random person on the internet suggestion.
Disclaimer, disclaimer.
Disclaimer, I'm not a critic.
Yeah, so as I mentioned, we did read Frankenstein in anticipation of reading Eynhallow, and I think it really helped since I hadn't read it since university, since I have an English degree. I wrote this section in the notes before I had read the book, and I had guessed that this book took place in Scotland during the time period where Victor left poor Clerval and went off on his own. And I was correct, since that's when he went to Scotland. It wasn't that much of a shot in the dark. It was a pretty educated guess.
Yes.
So I'm not patting myself on the back too much.
Hey, I'd count that as a win. After the L that we take in the middle of this book, I think we need all the wins we can get. I highly recommend, if you've never read Frankenstein, or if you haven't read Frankenstein maybe since you were like forced to in high school or something, give it another go. It's a great book. Super well written. I love it a lot, and I'm really glad that I got to reread that. So at least like that's like an extra point for Eynhallow for making me read Frankenstein again.
Yeah, it deals with the themes a lot more coherently than Eynhallow does, in my opinion.
Absolutely, I agree with that. As you might be able to guess, this wasn't really a favorite immediately for either Beth or myself, and even with more time to kind of mull it over, I would say this is probably not a book that I would really recommend, like just as a good book to read. Like if the subject interests you, if you get into our spoilers after this little section and it interests you, like go for it. But this isn't one that I'm going to be recommending to any of my friends anytime soon.
Yeah, I agree. I was with it at the beginning. The first half, I was on board. I was having a good time. It wasn't my favorite book. I probably still wouldn't have recommended it, but it was inoffensive. And then we got to the middle, and yeah. So I think now's as good a time as any to jump into the spoiler section.
Let's do it.
Getting into spoilers. Let's do this. So we start out meeting Agnes, who is Agnes Tulloch. She lives on the Isle of Eynhallow in the Orkneys with her husband Robert and 4 children. I don't want to call him Mr. Tulloch. That feels weird. I don't like it.
It was so awkward to me every time she called him Mr. Tulloch, but when we get into how they met, it makes a lot of sense, but I hate it. It's gross.
Yeah, that's why it's gross to me. I mean, it's gross before I learned about it and after I learned about it. So, there are 20 people living on this island, as I mentioned in the non-spoiler section. She didn't originally come from this island. She is quite large and tall. They call her a giantess, and I think, there's some foreshadowing there. Pretty clear foreshadowing.
Yeah.
And she is prone to looking out to the sea, as we learn. So so my notes on this, I had quoted, she's talking to her friend Kate, who also lives on the island, who is her closest friend, who is pregnant. And at the beginning, they're talking, and Kate says, "Yes, another miracle of birth," she drolls. "Like that doesn't happen every day. Don't you wish something different would happen? Something to shake us all up?" And the purpose of this quote was emphasizing the cavalier attitude that Kate has about creating life and contrasting that to Frankenstein, where it's so mysterious to him and he's creating life from death, but it's such a difficult process. Whereas Kate has had, what, 6 children at this point? So it's such an easy thing. And at the beginning, we do kind of have an assault from Robert and Agnes. I would call it assault.
Yeah.
She says no and he insists. And then she's like, fine.
Yeah. At the very least, it's marital rape. Like,
yeah. Yeah.
I'm not a fan. Robert's pretty hateable from the very beginning.
From the beginning. And she says, don't finish in me. I don't want to get pregnant again. So the idea of it being so easy to just, get pregnant.
Yeah.
And I had also written down that Agnes is a stand-in for the creature as she lacks agency in her life. She didn't choose her husband. She wants a true companion beyond what she has in Kate. So she talks about Jamie, her one true love. And when she's talking about Jamie as well, she's talking about how herself and Robert met, as Robert was a widow and was friends with her dad.
Yeah.
And basically her stepmother just wanted to push her out of the house.
I find the Jamie thing also interesting because, like, he is not only, like, her childhood sweetheart and the first person that she ever loved, and the person that she actually loved when she was, like you just said, her stepmother kind of roped her into marrying Robert. But also, he was her love before she hit her growth spurt that has kind of defined her as a person since. So he loved her before when she was quote unquote normal. And then he also loved her after when she was a giantess and most people were kind of weirded out by her. So, like, it's pretty easy to see why she's still stuck on this. What, she left when she was 16, right? To marry Robert?
Yes, I believe so. Yeah.
Yeah.
The other quote that I had written down was, if only I'd possessed the brains or the wherewithal to see the clockworks pushing me this way and that. So she doesn't have agency in her own life. And even choosing Robert, quote unquote, choosing Robert wasn't really her choice.
No, she was pressured into it because it was Jamie was penniless and motherless and a bunch of other stuff. And it was the quote unquote right choice to marry Robert instead.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And which isn't a choice at all,
No.
I guess.
There is one quote that I had highlighted towards the beginning that I think just speaks a lot to Agnes's character and kind of her mental state. She's talking about wanting to get to sleep, but on its own, this quote can kind of encompass her whole life, really down to it. It says, I want the comfort of oblivion, of peace, but concerns over the children or the house, the squalor we endure, nag me relentlessly. And that's just her life, like in one sentence.
For sure. Yeah, and she loves her kids, but it's clear that, like, she didn't want this.
No. Well, and it's clear too that she loves her kids, but, like, wouldn't it be really cool if she had a co-parent to help her with those kids?
Yeah, she's a single mom who works 2 jobs.
Yeah.
She loves her kids and never stops. She is a survivor until the end. Well, I guess she's still a survivor at the end.
Yeah, she survives-ish.
The other thing I had written down was just how Robert keeps saying that's a good girl. And it just, like, prickled that little part in my brain. I was just like, I wish there was a real person so I could punch him.
Absolutely. 100%. I mean, good job, author, whose name I immediately forgot.
Tim McGregor.
Good job, Tim McGregor. I hated Robert from the get-go.
Mm-hmm. Yes. So she longs for Jamie, the life she didn't choose. She hopes that he's well, but yeah, her life is full of bustle, but I think it's not one that she's chosen. But I think without Robert there, it probably would be easier. Certainly.
Yeah, honestly, because, like, when he's not being an absentee father who never helps with the children, he is abusing her constantly or cajoling her into sex when she doesn't want to have sex. And it's just, little baby spoiler, but when she finally fights back later on, I was delighted in that moment.
Yeah. because she just takes it, and she talks about his rages that he gets angry and drunk and blah blah blah, and it's just like this is like a lot.
Yeah, 100%. I find her, because you mentioned like staring out to sea, thinking about Jamie, because Jamie had promised like, I'll rescue you one day, like I'll come out to Eynhallow and I'll take you away from it. And so she's prone to like staring out to sea. She's like, when I say staring out to sea, I mean girlfriend is out on the beach with like a couple of her kids collecting seaweed and like loses hours. Like she
Yes.
blinks and it's evening. Like it's wild how intensely she is disassociating on that beach.
I mean, honestly relatable though. Like maybe she's got ADHD. I don't know.
Oh my god, that must be it.
Yeah, it's pretty wild. She's like, "Oh, I gotta pay attention to the kids." It's like you have your children around you. Your 4 children.
Yeah.
Yeah, 4 children. Grace, Meg, Kit, and Effie. Yeah, just staring out to sea.
Also, I want to real quick. You had mentioned that she has 20. There's 20 people on this island. The majority of them are children.
Oh,
most
yeah.
most of the people on this island are her children, Kate's children, and like I don't know. I guess maybe another couple has children too. That we don't really get too much into them, but like it's mostly like 4 families and their kids.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. 6 kids with Kate, and then, yeah, 4 kids with her. So that's half the people on the island right there. Very funny. We also have the goat Daisy,
Oh,
who we love.
I love Daisy.
And there's one horse on the island. So my proposal is to introduce a section called Horse Watch,
okay.
where basically the segment is just I just point out the horses. And
Yeah.
for this one, there's one, and it's doesn't have a name, but I love it.
It's a good horse.
It's a good horse.
It pulls that wagon. So this, yeah, I believe at this point in the podcast, then that would put us at a 3 out of 3 score for horses, because David very clearly states that the neomorph is like a horse, therefore it's a horse. And in Final Girl support group, is it Danny?
Yeah.
Danny owns a ranch where she rehabilitates horses. So
yeah, we had lots of horses there.
a lot of them.
Great.
Our book's gonna get like a negative if there is no horse.
No, I don't think so. I think
Okay.
it's just disappointing for the segment.
That's fair. That's fair. All right.
I think I'll just be sad that there's no horses.
That's so valid. Although this horse makes me sad.
Yeah. Yeah, later on, yes. But I think if there wasn't that horse, we still have Daisy, so that kind of it does help.
Yeah. And Daisy, like Beth mentioned, is a goat, but Daisy's basically a dog. Like she follows the kids around, they ride around on her back. She loves to be in the house, and Agnes is constantly telling her not to be. She's a very good goat, and I love her.
Daisy has done nothing wrong. So, speaking of people who do wrong things.
Yes.
Victor Frankenstein arrives on the island. And at this point, I was sort of thinking, okay, so we're going to keep like a distance from Frankenstein. We're just going to like be in the story, and sort of be in the periphery of what's happening. And maybe, we'll get to see what happened in more detail from a different perspective. And that'll be really interesting. And I was totally in on that. I was like, okay, so we're in a slice of life, and we're going to experience the horror and the impact this guy had on this small island. And in a way, I was right, but not in the way that I thought.
Yeah, same. I will also say, Beth, I have to correct you. Frankenstein doesn't arrive to the island. Firkin von Lederhosen arrives to the island.
Oh my god, you're so right.
Because apparently nobody on this fucking island can say the name Frankenstein.
Yeah, I don't know what it is. I am not from Scotland, and Tim McGregor is not from Scotland. So I don't know if this is some sort of inside joke with maybe his friends or family that Scottish people can't pronounce things. It seems mean. I don't know. I don't know. It's a mystery.
I have multiple quotes highlighted where people don't know how to pronounce Frankenstein, and it's fun. It's fun and it's funny because like at one point, like tiny spoiler, we're moving ahead a little bit. Agnes starts helping out Frankenstein around the old lab, And he literally says, "Hi, I'm Victor Frankenstein." And she goes, "Victor Franken sir, anyway." And like just doesn't say. I'm like, "Girl, he just said it."
Yeah, it's not that hard. I don't know. We'll have to find somebody Scottish and make them say it and see if it's a
Oh.
challenge for them.
If you listener are Scottish, please send us to our show email, which is in the show notes. You saying Frankenstein.
Yeah, or join the Discord and just put it in the chat. Just put a voice
Oh
note in the
yeah,
chat.
join our Discord. That sounds a lot easier than sending it to the email. So definitely do that instead.
Yeah, yeah. And we'll still play it.
Yeah,
If anybody does it.
for sure.
Yeah.
But yeah, so sorry. Frankenstein's here. He's here and he's socially isolated because he's a stranger, an outsider.
And he's rich. I mean, we
He's-
know he's rich, I guess.
yeah.
But he's throwing money around. Everybody's pretty happy that he's throwing money around, but he's also an outsider. So, of course, there's gossip. Yeah. So, Agnes helps out. She becomes his cook and housekeeper. In that sense, she's still taking care of her kids. So, she doesn't really want to do it, but she basically brings him dinner from what she's made. And she just sort of sweeps up the house while he's there because he's too busy doing science, unfortunately, and being sad.
Yeah.
Which is accurate to the book, the original book. He is sad and does science a lot.
So far, I'd say that it's a pretty accurate portrayal of Victor Frankenstein being depressed and doing some science, and also being sometimes angry and throwing stuff at walls.
Yep.
I will say that this is when I got my first hint that this was going to be a romance, was when Robert, without asking Agnes, first of all, volunteers her to be Frankenstein's housekeeper. But the way he phrases it is he says that Victor needs a wife.
Oh, yeah.
And as soon as he said those words, I was like, oh, it's going to be a romance.
I was still in the horror mindset. I have read a lot of romance books, but I don't know. It blindsided me. I didn't expect it. And maybe I should have. I feel like you're right. The hints were there. I was naive.
You didn't want to see them. And it's so valid because I actually really, really enjoy Frankenstein, Victor, and Agnes getting to know each other and becoming friends, and him like giving her a book and like all this stuff where she feels like she's had no choices in her life. She has 3 books in her house, and one of them's the Bible, and the other 2 sound boring. And he gives her a new book, and it means the world to her. And every time I go into a book, I just desperately want them to allow male and female characters to be friends. And
Yes.
I guess I saw the writing on the wall mostly because I'm used to having that hope broken every time I read a book.
That's so valid. I guess I just had higher hopes for this book.
Yeah.
I don't want to rant too much about it, but I had this book recommended by a particular horror book influencer, and I'm kind of mad about it because she rated it so highly, and all the ratings are so high on Goodreads. And I was like, okay, maybe this one will be good. And I was just disappointed.
Yeah, I will say this was entirely like I had never heard about it when you brought it up as your pick. And I didn't read anything about it. I read it all in one sitting. And then I went and I looked at the reviews on Storygraph to see what other people are saying, because I still don't know 100% how I would score this, just because, like I said, there are parts that I really enjoy, but there's so much that I don't, that it's hard to decide on that. But I looked at other people's scores. They're all so high. They're all like 4-star reviews at least. And one of the first ones I read, I was like, wow, I feel like this person read an entirely different book than I did.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think my problem going to Goodreads is that there are a lot of ARC reviews on Goodreads, and I don't trust those. Sorry to ARC reviewers, but I don't think that they are accurate a lot of the time.
Yeah. It's hard for people to be quote unquote mean to something that they
Yes.
got for free. And I think what people need to work on, and I mean, this is probably reflective in myself as well. I have a lot of things where I'm like, "Oh, it's fine, whatever."
Hmm.
But it's not mean to be critical of something. Like, you can be critical in a mean way, but you can also be critical in a just normal way that sets up realistic expectations for a book I'm about to read.
Yeah, absolutely. So, with that all being said, the next plot item I have is that the creature is spotted while Agnes attends Katie's false labor. So, Agnes is up at the house with Frankenstein, I believe, and she's summoned to Katie's side, and Katie is going into false labor, and Agnes sees the creature on the aisle, and at one point, Katie sees him as well. I think not at this point, but I don't
No,
think I
yeah.
had it written down. But Katie does see him as well.
So Agnes had seen it. She went out at night to the
Hmm.
beach and she saw something at the beach and then it got really tall. And so she realized that it wasn't, she thought it was Victor at first, but
Hmm.
it was too large and lumbering to be Victor. And once again, I don't know if you guys know this, but Agnes is a very tall woman. She's extremely tall. So if something is tall to her, it's very tall. And then I believe, yeah, Katie, before her false labor started, I believe she had spotted a
Hmm.
figure like up in the hills. And at first she thought it was Agnes because it was very tall. And then she realized that it was too large to even be Agnes.
Hmm. Because Agnes is so big, you
She's
guys.
so tall. She's like a giantess. She can thatch a roof from the inside.
Oh my God, crazy.
I know.
The amount of times it's mentioned, I guess I should have known it was a romance book. Mentioning one of the main character's features so
Oh
often
my God.
should have been a hint to me that it's a romance.
You're right. And, just sorry, we'll get back to Katie's false labor in a second, but did you notice a lot of like repetition in this book? I felt like things were repeated
Yes.
a lot.
Yes, a lot. So the story I mentioned about Jamie is repeated almost word for word twice. So the first time we learn about Jamie, and then at the beginning of one of the chapters, he says it again.
Yeah.
It's not even like it was an elaboration. It was just the same thing again. We don't get any more details.
Yeah.
So I didn't understand that. It was very confusing.
Yeah, I agree. There's just a lot of things where I'm not a writer. Like I'm not here to be overly critical of people who have published work when I have nothing. However, there's like they always do tell you like, "Oh yeah, you need to like repeat your themes. Like, make sure your themes get in there." This isn't like themes repeating. This is like literal the same thing happening again that's already happened or being said again that's already been said. And it's a
Yeah.
little weird.
Yeah. It's a little strange. And again, it's a very like romance tropey thing to just sort of continually repeat the same physical features that a character has. And also the fact that she's so big, it's like, yes, obviously. Obviously, we got it.
Yeah, it's a lot.
Yeah, it's a lot.
And one and that's what gave like I will say this for this book. It did kind of divert my expectations at one point because like as soon as we read this and the book was like, did I mention that Agnes is extremely tall and also extremely strong and pain resistant? I was like, "Oh, she's the bride." Like obviously,
Yeah,
she's going to become the
yes.
bride. And then it kind of diverts and we'll get to that in a little bit.
Yeah,
So good for you, book. You successfully diverted my expectations once.
yeah. So, her smallest child had been sick for a while, and Victor gives her some sort of medicine, some sort of thing, whatever,
I don't know
to
why,
help.
but the way it was described, I was just like, "Oh, he powdered up some aspirin." Like it's I don't know
Yeah.
why, but that's like what it
Yeah.
felt like when he got it.
It was very that. Yeah, he gave her some mystery powder and was like, "Here, give this to your kid." And yeah, it very much felt like it was like aspirin.
Yeah,
It was very weird.
but it helped.
But anyway, yeah, it helped to his credit. He did cure her of the fever, which is great. And I did tear up a little bit at the when Effie gets better. She says, "Now you rest and I'll take care of you." And I like teared up a little bit. That really got me.
Yeah.
because it's clear that Agnes is like worked to the bone, and like even this 4-year-old wants to help.
100%. Outside of one thing that one of the kids does that we're going to get to in a bit, I loved these children. They all felt very real for children who have lived in a household where there is abuse and where one of the parents is more involved with their lives than the other one. So once again, credit to the author for that. Like these kids were well written. Sometimes kids can be annoying in media, in books or in movies, but these ones I felt like they were very well written overall.
Yeah, I would agree. Yeah, so after that, we get a bit more bonding with Victor and Agnes, where he kind of a weird scene where he draws her anatomy, but also gives her a new book. And it's so again, I feel like I should have seen the writing on the wall, but he draws her nude,
Yep.
but it's like anatomical
Yeah.
drawings. So I was like, okay, yeah, this is friend stuff. Sure. I could see this as friend stuff. I feel like, listen,
No,
okay.
listen. I'm with you. Normalize being naked around your friends, but also her internal like dialogue during this part, I was like, oh, she's catching feelings. Like I can already see it.
And I will say, this doesn't excuse it, but also I wasn't romantic with anyone or anything until after high school. So I feel like I don't take hints very easily. It's not my forte.
I get it. I 100% understand and I totally get where you're coming from. I just, like I said, as soon as he was like, hey, Agnes, let me draw you nude, I was like, okay, romance novel 101. Like, I see what's happening here.
So you're saying I have no excuse and I should have realized.
Beth, how much romance do you read?
Like a lot.
So, so I kind of feel like maybe if you were fresh out of high school, I would be like, yeah, that's understandable, Beth, but like, girl.
Yeah. No, you're right. I should have realized. Maybe it was my like hope clinging on
That's
that
so
it
valid.
wasn't that. I was so I was so hopeful that it wasn't a romance. I was so hopeful that this was just another like slice of life and we're getting these two separate worlds
Yeah.
and we would continue to see the two separate worlds and we'd see the story unfolding.
Well, and I agree because I feel like there is a world where this scene could have been just platonic, just him being interested in her unusual anatomy because did I mention she's incredibly tall and strong? But like this could have been that and it could have been a outsider for the first time since she was a child, like seeing her and not thinking that she was some weirdo freak for how she looked, but just being like, wow, like you're really tall. That's so cool. Can I draw your
Yeah.
musculature? Like, and I would have loved that as a step towards self-acceptance and a little bit better view of herself. But instead, of course, because it's a man and a woman, it's a romance.
Yeah. And you're absolutely right. I think maybe that's where my hope came in too, is that I was hoping that this encounter would help her to self actualize and it would help her story, not so much, the two coming together. I think that's where my brain was going and that's where the hope was
Yeah.
because, of the themes of the original book. I was kind of hoping that there would be a bit of a mirror there.
Yeah, I feel like there wasn't a we'll get to that towards the end. I feel like with
Yeah.
the yeah.
So, yeah, I also had a note here that Victor measures Agnes. And to me, it kind of paralleled the beginning of the book where he asks, she says no, and then he asks again, and she says yes. I don't like that so much.
I and you saying that now, like obviously you're talking about the scene in the beginning where Robert
Yeah.
uh insists upon having sex. Is this clever setup so that we know maybe that, even though Victor might seem better than Robert, that he is still an entitled man? Like,
Yeah, that's for sure. I think that's part of it, which is also why I was surprised by the romance. But Anyway, yes, I absolutely think that's part of it. I was sort of drawing that parallel
Yeah.
between the two scenes, and it kind of bugged me a bit.
No, yeah.
Because she's still not choosing. She still doesn't have that agency because she works for him. She's his employee, technically.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. I agree. I agree with that. That's a good parallel to draw. I had not thought about that in that moment. I was just upset about it because it was clearly going towards romance.
So she gets this book also from Victor, and we get a scene, the first sort of physical violence scene in the book where Robert beats Agnes and then throws the book in the fire. And I just thought it was kind of, I don't know, not funny in a funny way, but just kind of funny. She reads a part in the book where it says misunderstandings and neglect occasion more mischief in the world than any malice or wickedness. And I'm just like, okay.
Okay, themes.
Okay.
Yeah.
After this like violence that she's experienced.
Yeah. This scene was rough for me, especially when she talks about I'm not going to find the specific quote, but she has talked about her high pain tolerance before, and she brings it up again in this moment and is just like, I'm just going to wait for him to be done because I have a decent pain tolerance. And so she doesn't defend herself at all, and it's heartbreaking because you can tell that she has been beaten probably many times, and she knows that it's easier if she just doesn't fight back and lets him wear himself out, basically. And I hate it.
And the casualness with which him spitting on her, as mentioned,
Ugh.
was also very haunting to me.
Yes.
Did not like that. And again, just that like just the casualness with which she mentions it and the fact that clearly it's happened many times before is awful. Did not like it. Didn't like it at all.
Yeah. For me, there's a scene later that almost made me stop reading for a while. But this scene was close to that. And I guess despite, the setup and obviously Robert being an abusive individual, I guess I wasn't really expecting scenes of violence to be like so like thoroughly described in this book in that manner. And also the fact that the kids are like right there.
This is a 2-room cottage.
Yeah.
They're right there.
Yeah. I guess
They can see everything.
I wasn't expecting this kind of horror when I picked this book up, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, same. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I think my note here is Jesus, I didn't think I could hate Robert more. And then it happened.
Oh yeah.
So the other aspect of it is the scene later on. Kit, or Christopher, but he goes by Kit, imitates his father, where he starts to beat his sister Meg and tells her that she should get in her place and that she deserved it for speaking back. And Agnes kind of sees red at this point and grabs Kit and throws him off of Meg. And she obviously hates herself for enacting that violence on her son, but hates Robert more for showing her son that that's how he should behave.
Yeah.
That was also a really affecting scene for me.
Absolutely. It's just that generational learning.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I completely understood Agnes's anger and like her grabbing him and like kind of roughly tossing him away, but I also understood her like instant anger at herself for reacting that way. Like she's trying so hard not to be a violent individual in a world that has been violent towards her way too much.
Well, and she's also so strong.
Yeah.
So I'm saying it in a joking way, in a sarcastic way, but also realistically, she is a very strong person physically. So it does take effort for her to be peaceful and calm in a
Yes.
sense.
100%. She could very easily fight back against Robert and win every time. He's like a full like foot shorter than her, and
Mhm.
he is less strong than she is, but she consistently holds herself back in order to not be a violent individual, even though she so easily
And
could.
he's much older.
Yes.
So
Oh god.
I feel like I made some sort of comment about old people in one of the other episodes. I swear I'm not ageist. It just seems like it.
Sure, Bev. No, but the reason we bring it up is because she was 16 when they got married and he was in his late 30s, I think. Like he's significantly older than her and has been in a position of power over her since she was a young girl. So like her not fighting back against him and just kind of laying back and accepting it in almost every aspect of their marital life is something that has been trained into her from a young age, and I hate it.
Yeah, absolutely. So after that, Victor's cargo, quote unquote, is lost and he almost drowns. So,
So Victor is like, I need to go to the mainland to pick something up. I'm gonna rent your husband's rowboat. It was a rowboat,
yeah,
and Agnes is like, the tide is really rough around here, and like the waves get pretty big on the shore. They get choppy because there's lots of rocks. You should hire my husband to like just not just his boat, but have him go with you. And Victor, little rich boy Victor, is just like, clearly I am skilled at manual labor and I will get this giant crate into this rowboat by myself and row it back.
yeah, it's silly. It's very silly. And also doesn't make any sense because if we go back to the text, Victor has no problem hiring people. He hires people all the time.
Exactly.
All the time.
Exactly. I'm like,
Constantly.
homie, they're not gonna get in your crate on the rowboat ride back. Like, just have someone who knows how to captain a boat go with you, you idiot.
Yeah.
And guess what? He falls out of the boat and almost drowns and loses his quote unquote cargo.
Yeah, and it's coming from a university. So the cargo is obviously a body.
Yeah.
Yeah, this was one where one of those points where I was like, the canon does not match up with what's happening here.
Well, and I feel like too, it even within the text itself, even if we're not bringing in the original, within the text itself, we've seen that Victor hires people consistently to help him with stuff. He hired people to help him move all his crap off the boat when it dropped him off. He used the town wagon to get it up to the house that he rented. Like he's obviously not above paying people to help him, so like it makes no sense. It makes absolutely zero sense.
It's one of those romantic comedy tropes where it's a ridiculous situation that acts to put them together.
Oh, yeah, because of course, she, upon hearing from her husband that Victor rented the boat but did not rent his services, she runs out to the beach immediately and sees Victor in this rowboat with a giant crate struggling against the waves. And of course, what happens? The boat tips over and he goes under.
Yeah, and I think at this point my notes were still pretty positive. I actually liked how this book added more of the logistics to actually like getting a body and having to bring a body out here because the original text sort of glosses over that entirely. He's just like he does some science on a remote island and it's like, well, how?
Yeah.
How-
Agreed.
I'm
Agreed.
interested in that. How do you get a body out
It
here?
is very interesting. Well, and it's like, but see, also though, like with the logistics, he gets a letter that tells him that the body is ready, which means that someone comes to the island on a regular basis to bring mail, which means that there's yet another person that you could hire to bring you a freaking crate.
Yes, there are so many ways that he could have done this. And it's that, that meet cute or that glue
Yeah.
in romance trope that is supposed to bring them together, right?
Yeah. And it does. It does. She jumps in the water and saves him.
Yep. So yeah, because she's so strong and so big, she jumps in the water and brings him back to her house, warms him by the fire, and he meets her children, which I also noted was very sweet. I really liked it. And it also was a callback to how young William was when the creature killed him, his
Yeah.
younger brother. So it was a nice scene. I really liked it, despite the contrivance of it.
I agree. It's your typical like, oh no, get out of these cold clothes and next to the fire and under this blankie type thing. But also her kids are there, so it's not as overtly
Horny.
romantic-y and horny as it normally is. But yeah, I agree though. I think Victor like talking to the kids was very sweet, especially him talking to Kit
Yeah.
because he notes that like your mom just saved my life basically. And Kit hearing this and realizing that like his mother just like single-handedly rescued a man from the ocean is like immediately so proud of her and is like talking about how strong she is. He's like, "Oh, she can lift 9 stone or something like that." And she's like, "I not that much." Like but
Yeah.
it's really sweet and I think it just really shows that like his earlier behavior is just that like echoed learned behavior and he has potential to be a sweet person and like a nice person.
Well, and hearing him defend her after she was violent towards him is also a really great indicator that he it didn't affect him as much as she was afraid that it did.
Yes.
The next night, Victor is attacked by the creature. Victor and Agnes grow closer at that point because she sort of helps to clean his wounds and nurse him. And I still didn't see the writing on the wall, I'll say at this point. I still didn't. I
Oh,
was still blindsided later. Anyway,
Beth, I've given you a lot of benefit of the doubt in this. Are you sure that you read romance books? Like,
Mr. Policeman, I've given you all the clues.
100%.
Oh yeah, this is where the repeated phrases come in as well when talking about Jamie. So it's I will say it's clear that she has a crush on him. I'll say that. I wasn't ignoring that. I did see that she had a crush on him and she was like, "Oh man, this is so bad. Like I shouldn't have a crush on him." And I get it. Like that part I got, but I was like, "Well, still though, it can still be salvaged. The platonic relationship."
I love how deep in like the denial that you were at this point. Genuinely though, I do enjoy the scene. Despite the repetition of her, Jamie's story and everything, I enjoy once again, like in my ideal world, this just like friends getting to know each other better and him opening up to her more. Like he doesn't fully open up to her, obviously. He's not gonna be like, and then I created an abomination against God. Like but he does open up like a bit more to her about what's going on in his life and I like that. I like it when characters are able to like prop each other up and help each other out during emotionally difficult times.
Yeah, absolutely. I like this section a lot, despite the repeated story, repeated phrases, and repeated words in that chapter.
Yeah.
So this is where Victor and Agnes kiss. And now it really is Frankenstein fan fiction. And I got so mad at this point. I was livid, absolutely livid. If only you could see the paragraph that I wrote. It's so long.
It is, I think, the longest portion of our show notes overall is this beautiful rant. And totally earned rant. I fully agree with every point that you make in this.
I was in it up until this point. I was so in it. I had positive notes. I had written a lot of positive things about it, despite the copied and pasted stories, despite the repetition. I thought this was going to be an interesting perspective to explore some of the themes that Mary Shelley wrote in Frankenstein, in the sense that she was a woman writing from the perspective of a male character, writing about female autonomy. And I thought it would be interesting having a male author writing about a female character, exploring the same things from a modern perspective, because obviously, despite being set in 1797, he's writing it from modern times. So I was like, okay, that's a new spin. That's a new perspective. Maybe we'll see that. I don't love hearing from men more often, but like, it's fine. It seems like it'd be interesting. I wish I had known it was going to be this ahead of time. I truly can't capture the same anger that I felt after this. I put the book down and I didn't pick it up for several more hours because I was very mad about it. The author introduced another love interest that it could have been. It didn't have to be Victor Frankenstein. It could have been Jamie. It could have been anybody. It could have been some other rando. I don't
Yeah.
know. It could have been
I
anyone.
personally, like, so I could see the romance writing on the wall, obviously, but I also, like, at the same time, I love Agnes's friendship with Katie. I thought that that was a beautifully written female
Yeah.
friendship from a male author. Like, that was excellent.
Yeah.
He did a
It
great
was
job with
beautiful.
that. And there are some, we kind of glazed over it because obviously it's not the main focus, but there's some weirdness going on with Katie's husband where she's talking about how he's becoming like weird and distant and stuff. And I sort of thought that they were moving towards Agnes and Katie planning to like run away together to get away from their like abusive
Yeah.
husbands or something. It comes to
And it kind of,
nothing. Her husband's
yeah.
fine. Like there's nothing wrong with him.
I think it's just him being nervous about the pregnancy. I think he's just like trying to take care of her.
Yeah.
The other thing I want to say is that there could have been no love interest. I think we've made that clear.
Yeah.
And just, again, female friendship or even just male female friendship,
100%.
like that would have been great.
We're going to get to this, obviously, because obviously we'll get to this. But Victor basically promises to help Agnes and her kids. And
Yeah.
he could have easily done that as a friend and not just as a love interest. And I would have been perfectly content with a story where she is escaping her abusive husband and finding her independence
Yes.
versus where she is now once again relying entirely on another man
Yeah.
to help her and to get her away from this, and it still, she at this point still does not have control over her life.
Exactly. And I think that it would have interfered less with the canon of Frankenstein. Not that this is adding to canon, but it would have interfered less with my, I guess, immersion. Because if this had occurred, there's no way that Frankenstein wouldn't have mentioned Agnes. There's just no way. Even despite the bad things that had happened, he still would have mentioned Agnes to Walton because he's so verbose about his friendships. He spoke so glowingly of Clerval, and so much about Elizabeth and like all of his relationships. He spoke so in so much detail about,
Yeah.
and there's just simply no way that he wouldn't have mentioned this significant person in his life during this time. And that kind of brought me out of it. It's just like, I could accept that he maybe would ignore or that he wouldn't mention somebody who was a housekeeper. I could accept that because he's a rich bastard. Maybe he just didn't like see her value, but becoming a love interest and like boning her on this island, there's no way. There's just simply no way that he wouldn't have said something about it to Walton,
No,
especially
100%.
with what happened, because he's confessing his sins to Walton
Yeah,
in the book.
exactly. And I would argue too that even if this had remained a platonic relationship at this point, like before the kiss, if everything happened except for the kiss and what came after, I still don't think that Frankenstein would have never mentioned it because this was obviously, she had become a dear friend at that point, at the very least.
Yes, exactly. And again, because in the book, he tells Walton all about his friends and definitely would have mentioned Agnes. And it still would have been her choosing, again, if we're going back to Agnes's story, it still would have been her choosing herself in this moment. Even if she hadn't have chosen the kiss and this romance, she still would have been choosing something for herself in this friendship with Victor, because he's an outsider like her and in a similar vein to Katie. It just would have been an enriching relationship in her life.
I agree.
But also, I understand also in terms of theming, the description of sex, she gets very rough and she says something inside me snaps and that she's a boulder rolling downhill. So in terms of like the narrative place this has in the story, I do get it. I just think it could have been accomplished in different ways.
I agree. Yeah, the sex scene, if the sex scene has to be there, it was a decent sex scene. I enjoy that she has autonomy during this sex,
Yes.
unlike any other sex that she's ever had in her entire life. Which is
Yeah.
just with Robert, obviously. But she's on top. She takes control. Like, she does not let him do what he wants. It's all about her satisfaction. And I'm happy for her for that. I don't think that a sex scene in which she has control was the only way of getting her to that point in characterization, though. And I don't think that it is the most fitting way for her to get to that point in characterization. But
No.
I acknowledge that for what it is and for what we are getting, which is Frankenstein fan fiction with a hot, tall mommy romance for Victor, is
It's fine.
it's okay.
Yeah.
It's fine.
It's fine.
I think if I had known going into this that this was going to be more romance heavy, I would have been fine with it. I think the issue is I didn't really know anything about this, and I I love romance novels. I own so many paranormal romance novels. Y'all don't even know. But I go into those knowing that I'm getting into a romance novel, and that's what I want and expect to read. My issue here is that I wasn't expecting that, and it wasn't what I was currently interested in reading. I thought I was reading some cool added Frankenstein lore, but
I did not consent to this romance.
exactly.
I totally agree. I didn't expect it and I didn't want it. I just feel like it was a clumsy way to establish her independence. It was a clumsy way to establish her realizing her value in her own right because it's through a man still. And there are so many better ways to do that. And I just think it could have been a lot better. So by this point, I'm out. I'm like pretty done with this book. I didn't want to keep reading, but I have fewer points after this. I just kind of was writing them down as a matter of rote.
Yeah.
So we have directly after this.
Like Agnes is still naked.
Yes. It's a choice to have this happen directly after, but we get the labor of Katie. And the message that is given is that the mother must survive over the baby. However, they do both die. It's described in detail the cleaning of the bodies, of both bodies, and the loving way in which they're arranged. And all of the women of the island come together to clean her and take care of her and the baby.
Yeah, it's a rough section. And this is the part that I had to take a little breather after. I read this book almost entirely in one sitting, but this scene is very difficult, and a lot of what comes after it is also very difficult because, like Beth was explaining, like, it is incredibly touching to see the women of this island come together to ready Katie for burial. Because these women have been nothing but assholes the entire time to Agnes, but like in this moment, in this task, they are kind of united because it is very much touching on that theme of the miracle of birth, but also the danger that every woman goes through when she gives birth, that every person who gives birth goes through. And it's heartening a bit because it's so hard in this book overall because Agnes is just like nobody is nice to her ever except for Victor for a really long time and her kids to an extent. But like this is the first time that the other women are kind to her, and it's so heartbreaking that it's because of the grim task ahead of them.
Yeah, it's the care that's taken with this body is also again life and death. So in death there also is care and it's accepted and it's something like for example in Frankenstein he doesn't accept death at the beginning. Obviously later on he decides that he can't do it anymore, but it's something that is very cavalier about, it feels like, and is not obviously not careful with bodies that he's taking.
No.
He he's very careless with the rowboat and the cargo, quote unquote, that he has, which is clearly a woman's body that is from a university, and he doesn't see it as a person anymore. And it's very clear that this community does. And that's a normal way to look at death.
100%.
So, and that's again something that's missing from the original novel, but I think that that's an accurate way that a scientist would view a body and view death, a cadaver. So,
Yeah.
I don't think it's a flaw. I just think it's just something that's missing.
And also not to dwell too much on this scene, because it's a hard scene to read. But you mentioned that the message that they give is that the mother must survive over the baby. And I will note that is specifically Agnes like saying that,
Mm-hmm.
because she has her daughter go get Victor, because she's like, well, he's almost a doctor. He can help. And he immediately suggests basically a cesarean, but back in the day when it was not
Mm-hmm.
a safe process. And Agnes knows that that will mean that Katie will likely die. And she immediately pushes back against it and is like, no, Katie has to live, because she loves and cares about this woman so
Yeah.
much. And
Yeah.
yeah, no, I had to take a break. I had to take a break after this. It's rough. It's super rough.
Yeah. Which is the reason for the trigger warning at the beginning, because I feel like I wasn't prepared for this going in, and even recapping it, think I would like to take a very short break.
Yes, 100%.
So, right after that is Katie's funeral, and the community kind of comes together at Katie's husband's house, Tom, and it's also kind of a nice scene where they're celebrating. However, Robert, of course, gets too drunk, and she can see the kids are trying to go to sleep. The kids are tired, so she wants to take the kids home, and Robert judges her. He kind of scoffs at her and basically accuses her of not wanting to be there for Tom.
Yeah.
And Robert fucking sucks.
Robert fucking sucks. And I will know, even before this, Victor had like showed up at the burial, and he like volunteers to stay behind to fill the grave,
Yeah, of course he takes the body.
which obviously, of course he does. But we don't know that yet. Quote unquote. Agnes doesn't know that yet.
I was going to say, we know that.
We know that. Agnes doesn't know that yet. And then he also shows up to the funeral, to the service where, you know, they're all gathering to drink and eat and remember Katie. And Robert is immediately like, what the fuck is this guy doing here? Because he hates him.
Right.
And Agnes, in a very like rare occurrence in this book, talks back to him and is like, oh, just let him stay. And
Right.
Tom luckily speaks up and is like, yeah, like he was so kind to help fill the grave. Tom, bless your heart. But he's like, you know, and he tried his best to help, you know, and he lets him stay, but like he's
Not having it.
fuming. And then she is like, I'm taking the kids home. And he's even madder.
Yeah. He's like, stay and have fun. Like,
Yeah,
okay.
so fun. Meanwhile, she's like carrying around two of her kids that are already asleep, and like the other two, even though they're older, they're getting there. Like, dude.
Yeah. Let your kids go to bed. Yeah. So, of course, he beats her again, but she fights back this time. And Robert finds out about Victor because she's already packing her bags, isn't she?
Yeah, so when she gets home from the funeral, she starts packing, because Victor is basically like, I'll be done with my mysterious work that you can't know about tomorrow morning, and we can leave like first thing in the morning. And so she starts packing her bags. This scene also very sad. She has like this trunk that she's putting stuff in, and it's like a quarter full, and she's like, well, that's everything that means anything in my life. Like, it's so it's so sad.
Yeah.
But Robert comes home, and at this point, she's just like, I'm leaving tomorrow. I'm done with you and this. I'm leaving the island, and I'm taking the kids. And he starts to beat her, and she slams his head against the wall.
Yeah. I thought she was going to kill him, and I was going to be like, yes, girl.
Same.
Like, murder this man.
But she sees her kids, so she refrains herself.
That's right. So Robert finds out about Victor because he finds the portrait, I believe. doesn't he?
No, the daughter finds the portrait later. I think he just put one and one together finally. I think Robert did
Mm.
basic math for the first time in his life.
Yeah, that's right. So Robert makes the connection and kicks her out, locks her out.
She goes to sleep in the shed with the goat, with Daisy.
Yeah. And then she sees lightning coming from Victor's house. So she goes to investigate and she sees Katie's body.
Oh, she goes into the forbidden room. There's
That's
always that
right.
room in every like horror book where the guy is like, "You can go wherever you want, but never this room." Well, she goes in there, and there's Victor, and there's the creature, and there's Katie
Katie's body and the baby.
and the baby.
So the creature is demanding that he do it. And he's like, it didn't work or whatever. He refuses to do it. And the creature's like, hey, what about her? Which, okay, first, she's alive. Like, what are you doing? What are you talking about?
Yeah. So this
The whole
part,
deal is that Victor wants to create life. And the whole deal with the monster is that he wants somebody
like
who is
him,
monstrous as him to live with. But also, the whole idea is that he's a new person. He is like a new life. Is that what they're trying to create? So like to be like, what about her? So then like kill her and then bring her back? But like, what are you talking about? What are you talking about? I didn't understand the rules. I didn't get the internal logic of this because she keeps her memories. And of course she does.
100%. You're so valid. Yes, I this whole scene, I hated it. The creature had revealed himself to Agnes a little bit before this too. Like
Yeah.
he's like, "Hey, fuck off. Victor's an asshole." And I'm like, "Yeah, yeah, he kind of is." And but do whatever you want, but for now leave him alone cuz he needs to finish his work or whatever.
His work. Yeah.
But yeah, no, like this part, like even so maybe this is just me being stupid. But like the whole thing with the creature is that he's basically like this new species. He's a new thing because
Yeah.
he's assembled from multiple corpses and like
Right.
multiple bodies, and he was born when
Yeah.
Victor created him and gave him life. Even with Katie, I didn't understand what they were like. Wouldn't that just bring Katie back?
Yes, that's what I'm saying. None of this makes sense. It's all weird. And
Yeah.
I could see, like, I don't know, maybe I'm just extrapolating, but I could see, like, a cadaver from a university or something being dead long enough that maybe, like, you know,
The
she
soul.
wouldn't have her memories because
Yeah.
the soul is, yeah, sure. I could see that. Maybe. But,
Maybe.
like,
I don't agree though. Like that's my thing is like, and that's the thing is because like, okay, obviously in the original in the original, like he gets a brain of some like, criminal or whatever as the brain, but
sure.
it's not that criminal. Like the creature is not the
No.
same person of the brain. So obviously the implication is that this is a new living entity with its own soul that came from somewhere. Who fucking knows?
Yes. And maybe I don't know, maybe to give them the benefit of the doubt, maybe the cargo wasn't like a body. Maybe the cargo was like a bunch of different parts. Like that's entirely possible as
Yeah.
well. And then he had to improvise on the fly. But still, like,
I can't remember in the original in the original text. Does it ever give any specificity as to like how he creates the bride
no,
at all? Okay.
no,
Because
no.
my assumption when I read the original was that it was the same idea. It was like
Yes.
get different body parts, assemble them into a person, and find a brain to put in the head.
Yes.
So yeah, I don't think that this manner of assembling a bride for the creature would result in the same sort of creature.
Yes, that's what I'm saying. That's exactly what I'm saying. Is that I could see, so okay. So this is what I was going to say before. Maybe to give the benefit of the doubt, maybe the cargo that was arriving was a bunch of different parts from the university, and he was going to assemble the bride and do it, but then he lost it, and then he was despairing, and he was like, what am I going to do? And then he was like, sweet, a fresh body, I'll just use that as like an improvisation. And he didn't know if it was going to work, but the creature was hassling him for something, so maybe that's what happened. And then
Yeah,
the
I could see
thing,
that.
so I'm like, okay, I'm with you so far. Sure, benefit of the doubt. I don't think it was going to work, which it didn't. Okay. But then he's like, give me Agnes. And it's like, what are you talking about? She's still alive.
Yeah.
This is like a bridge too far. I don't get it. I
Well,
don't
and
understand.
this is also the thing where I feel like in this moment, Victor both fits his original characterization and is the complete opposite of it at the same time. Because like
Yes.
him acquiescing immediately to what the creature wants, yeah, totally, definitely. He's a little coward baby. He's gonna do that. But him immediately betraying a friend and letting her get killed, like right there in front of him, baffling. Completely baffling. Also, there's this weird thing where they say that Katie wasn't strong enough, like, to
Oh,
come
yeah,
back.
that's right.
And then they
Yeah.
say that's when the creature's like, well, what about her? She's look how big and tall and strong she is. What about her? I'm like, what does physical strength have to do with the life-giving, like,
Yes.
procedure?
Also, you don't know.
Exactly.
You're like a month old. Like, what are you talking about?
What the fuck are you talking about, Adam? Whatever you want to call yourself. Like, what are you talking about?
So then also that's part of this book too, is that the creature like knows the procedure at this point. And it's like, how? How does he know? Victor barely knows.
Why don't you just go do it yourself then, bro? Like, obviously your creator's a dumbass in a lot of ways, dude. Like, did you see him drop that cargo box in the ocean? Like, do it yourself.
Yeah. He's dumb. So then the creature offers, at that point she like wakes up and she's undead or whatever. She's a zombie. And the creature approaches her and says like, hey, we can be together. And I'm like, this is where my rant came in about keeping her memories and stuff. And it doesn't make any sense. And so what was his plan? Did he think that she would lose her memories or something? Because like, if she didn't want you when she was alive, why would she want you now? But at the same time, I do understand in the context of the narrative that like having this choice from the creature is part of that narrative where she's choosing not to go with him because she's, she didn't choose to go with Robert. She didn't choose to, like, Victor offered to take care of her. And that was sort of like a choice in choosing Robert. But at the same time, we learned it's not, because he's a dick and a coward. And then, so in the context of the book, this is the third thing. And her refusing this offer is that like choosing herself and not choosing, a man, which, okay. But everything up until that point didn't make any sense. So I'm less likely to give you that story moment because it doesn't make any sense.
No, 100%. And like, so here's the thing with this. And so obviously I said this book got me. Like, it pulled a fast one on me. Agnes, big and tall and strong. Obvious, the bride. Katie, potentially being the bride. That threw me. I was like, oh snap, there's a body right there. And then it loops back around to Agnes. I legitimately thought that what was going to happen was the creature was going to be so upset that Katie was not successfully resurrected that he was going to kill Agnes to like fuck with Victor again. Because that's what he does. He kills people because Victor won't give him what he wants. And then I thought that Victor was going to be like, I thought he was going to try to bring her back out of grief or something. Like, I am so upset.
Okay, so here's what I would have accepted. Here's what I would have accepted in that scenario is if the creature killed Agnes, because that's what he does. That's his entire MO, is killing everyone around Victor that he's close to. And he like knew that they boned because Agnes was confessing it to Katie at her grave where she wasn't there. But the creature knew, so he knew that that Victor was close to Agnes, so he would kill her. This is my like news story.
Yeah. Yeah.
He would kill her, and then Victor would leave, but somehow in the like context of her being killed in this science lab, maybe the lightning happens and she gets brought back because of like the chemicals or something. I'm gonna give as much detail as Mary Shelley did, but like maybe I would accept that. I would suspend my disbelief for that, where she like accidentally comes back because of like that stuff, because it's also not Victor's MO to bring people back, because he didn't do it for Clairval, so why would he do it for her?
Because he wasn't fucking Clairval.
I mean, we don't know that.
We don't know.
But also, I would accept him because he does like just leave. That's also his like Frankenstein's MO is just fleeing. And I could see that. I could definitely see that, because in the letters, he's like, somebody from nearby cottage came. And I could see like that being the thing that he mentions as part of his story, that she died. And it's like, okay, great. Maybe he still thinks she's dead. And maybe the creature does the offer thing. The rest of the book happens.
Yeah.
Like she comes back and blah, blah, blah. That I could accept. But him killing her, you're completely right. It doesn't make any sense. It's so weird.
It's completely weird. Also, we kind of skimmed over it. I mean, we mentioned that the baby was also there. Agnes hears a baby crying as the creature like strangles her.
Yes. Yeah.
Which is the implication that Katie was weaker than a newborn baby? Like
What is this, JoJo's Bizarre Adventure?
Right? I don't know.
I'm so tired of the weak mom trope. I hate it.
Yeah, it's really sad. Well, and like that's the thing is like obviously they're not talking about physical strength in that. So
No.
what are you saying? Are you saying Katie was like weak spirited? She wasn't. She was a super tenacious lady. Like
Yeah.
I don't know. This whole scene frustrated me, and like this following after Katie's death and everything, like it was so hard to make myself keep reading at this point.
Yeah. And I will say also, in the sense of like weakness, Jotaro's mother is also not weak in spirit.
Yeah.
She's also a strong lady. Anyway, that is besides the point. So after this, yeah, I have so few points because I wasn't. Anyway.
100%. She tries to go back to her family first.
Yeah. So she goes back to her family and she watches them. She haunts the island. She watches Grace fall apart trying to take care of the family.
It's so sad.
And she talks to Effie.
Yes, because Effie found that picture.
Effie found the picture. So she ends up talking to Effie and basically says, you can't tell anyone. But of course, Effie does. She's 4.
Yeah.
She tells everyone, and Robert thinks that he's being haunted. And he also thinks that she left with Victor because Victor left the island.
No, that's a lie, though. That is an active lie on his part. She comes back the same night that she gets resurrected and goes into the house. And
right.
Robert sees her, like, full on in the house, dead as fuck. And he's like, that bitch ran off with Victor Frankenstein.
Yeah, I don't... to that point, though, I don't know if he necessarily put together that she was dead. I think that he could be like, well, she left in the morning or something, or left at some other point. Like I could sort of see that.
It's just because of their reaction to her appearance, though.
Yeah, for sure.
Like,
yeah, absolutely. Well, I could also see him gaslighting himself into thinking that it's not her.
That's
that
fair.
It's some like other spirit or something like that. So yeah, she continues to haunt. She talks to Effie. Effie tells the family that she's still alive. And Robert gets upset or whatever and isn't a good parent.
She haunts them again and basically tells Robert, you better fucking take care of these kids or I'm gonna kill you. And
that's right.
So he leaves the island with his kids, hopefully to take slightly better care of them. I don't trust that guy at all. But they leave.
I'm pretty mad that he lived.
I was honest. I wanted him to die so badly. Like, yes, obviously I'd make the kids orphans and that's sad, but like better orphans than children of that guy, honestly.
Yeah. Tom could take care of 10 kids. He seems good.
100%. Tom was a good guy. Also, they leave Daisy, which is heartbreaking. Daisy's
Yes.
like standing at the beach, watching them sail away. I'm like, you didn't take your fucking goat? Like, are you kidding me?
Yes. So Daisy follows Agnes around.
Yeah.
Everybody eventually leaves, the rest of the families.
Yeah.
At this point, it's kind of unclear as to how much time is passing because I think Agnes is immortal. She doesn't need to
She
eat.
tries to kill herself because she like goes active haunt mode, and then as soon as everyone leaves, she's like, "Well, fuck, what do I do now?"
I guess the implication is that she also doesn't need to eat, which isn't how Frankenstein's creature works, but that's fine. But she doesn't need to eat. She breaks her leg and then it doesn't heal. So for the rest of the time, she's just got a limp, which kind of sucks. That sucks a lot. So time passes. She's haunting the island with Daisy. Daisy grows old.
She keeps hearing the crying of the baby too. Before Daisy dies.
And then she finds the baby because at first she thought it was her imagination. And then she actually does find the baby in an alcove, in a cave. And she realizes that the baby is also mortal. So she burns the baby alive, which is so fun and great.
To be fair to her, she does try to like snap its neck to give it a quick death first, and it doesn't work, and that's even worse.
So bad. So then the fire makes people aware that there's somebody on the island. Some people visit, and she hides, and then they leave. Daisy dies. She just grows old. So we get sort of time passing, and it sort of also mirrors her looking out to the ocean, right? Where she loses herself
Yeah.
for a long time.
And we revisit that because that's all she's doing at this point is just like kind of staring out into the ocean. She's forgetting things from her life. Like she vaguely remembers names, she vaguely remembers the events that happened, but all
Mm-hmm.
she knows at this point is that she's waiting for someone.
And at this point, Hugo Frankenstein visits the island after Victor's notes, and he goes back to the house that Victor was using. And despite the fact that Agnes set a fire in the house, he does find some notes, and Agnes realizes that he's not going to stop. So she tells him that Victor was a coward, or no, she says he was scum, and then breaks his neck.
So something I don't think I've mentioned yet is the tonal inconsistency in this book. A lot of it feels very serious, very, we're handling heavy topics and we're talking about it seriously. And then there's other parts, like when bumbling ass Hugo Frankenstein shows up and he is acting like a cartoon villain, like not like a scary villain, but like oh, I'm so rich and my daddy has so much money. Like
Yeah, like very pulpy, like I would call it, like from like a pulp magazine sort of thing.
yeah, and he's just prattling on about how great and smart and wonderful his uncle Victor was. And I don't know if I was supposed to be taking it seriously or if this was supposed to be
Yeah.
like a joke.
Yes, completely. It was so weird and comical. And then yeah, she just says he was scum and then kills him. And then his corpse rots and then
Not before she eats his heart, though.
oh, that's right. She does reach into his chest and eat his heart.
Yeah, she roasts it over the fire and just yum yum. Yeah.
Which again tonally is weird. Like
Yes. Because
mismatched.
I will say this, like, we're kind of, perusing through it because not much happens at this point, obviously, aside from these, like, this visit. But tonally, I really enjoyed the ending. I enjoyed this lonely creature haunting this island. And I genuinely feel like the author came up with this ending and then went on from there. His thought was, what if the bride hadn't been destroyed?
Mhm.
And then everything else was built off of that.
Yeah, I also like the ending in terms of being contrasted with the beginning, where there's this cavalier attitude about life and how life just happens on this island. And despite there only being 20 people, most of them children, life is easy and is overlooked. And at the end of the book, she's the only thing there, and I wouldn't call what she's doing living.
Yeah.
So there's that contrast happening.
Yeah. So what do you score this book on the old Storygraph scale of 1 to 5?
I hadn't scored it yet, but probably I would give it, based on the end, I would say, okay, I would give it a 2.5, purely based on the end. If I'm only judging it by the middle, it's probably like a 2. But because of the beginning and the end, I'm giving it a little bit more. That's how I feel.
Yeah, I'm right there with you on that, actually. I feel like a 2.5 is a decent score. Like I said, the beginning and the build-up I really enjoyed. Even getting into Agnes's friendship with Frankenstein, I really enjoyed. It was just the middle section that really brought it down for me. So yeah, I would say that a 2.5 is a fair score for this book.
Agreed. So let's choose our next book. Let's leave this book behind us. Let's choose the next one. Let's spin the wheel.
Oh my goodness, it's time to spin the wheel. All right. I am going to spin the wheel to choose our next book that we're going to cover. And as a reminder, our wheel is divided into several categories, and those include just our regular TBR list, trending recommendations, seasonal or thematic, revisited favorites, revived from the DNF graveyard, movie book movie, which is still my favorite of the categories, and of course the one that we just got a book from, modernized classic. So here we go.
Ooh,
Interesting. Trending recommendation is the wheel slice that has been selected.
incredible. That's exciting.
That's going to be interesting. I don't have that many of those in mind because I don't really follow any like bookish accounts on most things. I've started more recently just so that I have like kind of a finger on the pulse of what people are checking out. So all of mine are probably a little bit older and not trending right this moment. But I think that the one that I would love to read is Mexican Gothic by Sylvia Moreno Garcia.
Ooh, I love that. This one I have read.
Oh,
so it'll be a reread for me, but that's okay. I love it. I think I have it marked as a favorite, perhaps. I don't know. So that's really fun.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm excited to check it out and see what's going on. I've heard a lot of good things about Miss Moreno Garcia's writing, so I'm excited to see for myself.
Okay. So thanks for listening. If you want more from us, our social media is in the show notes, as well as a link to our Discord where you can join the conversation and suggest books. So get out there and commit some David behavior.
See you next time.
Bye.
Bye.
So Katie,